I'm Sarah, and this is the story of how my husband Victor thought he could disappear with our life savings. It started with emptied bank accounts, mysterious phone calls to Colombia, and the name Sunrise Investments that I'd never heard before. Victor wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to take everything we'd built together over 12 years of marriage. But he made one critical mistake. He underestimated me. I didn't fall apart when I discovered he'd drained our accounts. Instead, I made one phone call that changed everything, to his boss. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What happened the next morning wasn't just unexpected. It was the beginning of Victor's carefully constructed plan crumbling around him, but the worst part wasn't just the betrayal or the money. It was realizing how meticulously he'd planned it all, how many lies he'd told over months, and the shocking lengths he was willing to go to leave me with nothing. This is the story of how I fought back when I had nothing left to lose. I still remember that Monday morning in April. The spring sunshine streamed through our kitchen windows as I sat at the table, staring at my laptop in disbelief. I'd just logged into our joint account to pay our monthly bills, something I did routinely on the first Monday of every month. Except this time, the balance that should have shown $38,542 showed just $117.43. My coffee went cold beside me as I frantically logged into our savings account. The $159,000 we'd been saving for our dream house, gone. Our emergency fund of $22,000, gone. The investment account with $95,000 from my inheritance after my father passed, gone. All of it, transferred out over the weekend while I'd been visiting my sister Carmen in Phoenix. My hands trembled as I called Victor. The call went straight to voicemail, just like the 5 calls I'd made that morning when he didn't come home Sunday night. I'd assumed he was working late and crashed at his colleague Brad's place like he occasionally did. Now, a different reality was taking shape. Victor, I'm looking at our bank accounts. Everything's gone. Call me back immediately. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, too calm, too controlled for the hurricane raging inside me. I tried to think rationally. There. Had to be a mistake. Maybe our accounts had been hacked? I called the bank, my heart pounding as I was put on hold. When the representative finally answered, what she told me made the room spin. Mrs. Delgado, those transfers were authorized using the correct account credentials and security questions. They were initiated on Friday at 3:42 p.m. and completed early Saturday morning. The funds were transferred to an account at First Global Bank under the name Sunrise Investments. I didn't authorize any transfers, I said, my voice rising. That's our life savings. I understand your concern, but according to our records, the transfers were initiated from your home IP address using your husband's login credentials. There was also a phone verification that matched your husband's number on file. The room seemed to close in around me. Victor had planned this. While I was packing for my weekend with Carmen, he was emptying our accounts. While I was sending him photos of my niece's birthday party, he was erasing our financial future. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. 12 years of marriage, a home we'd built together, vacations, holidays, the fertility treatments we'd been saving for. All of it reduced to $117.43 and a name I'd never heard. Sunrise Investments. I forced myself to move, to think. I went to our home office, the space where Victor had been spending increasingly late nights over the past few months. Working on a big project, he'd said. This promotion could change everything for us. I started searching through his desk drawers, finding nothing unusual until I reached behind the filing cabinet and felt something taped to the back. A passport, Victor's, but issued just 3 months ago. His regular passport was in our safe. Why would he need a second one? And then I saw it, the visa for Colombia stamped inside, dated for entry yesterday. My mind raced back through the past few months. Victor taking more international calls than usual. his sudden interest in learning Spanish through those late-night language apps, the way he'd begun asking about my schedule, my plans, making note of when I'd be away from home. I sank into his office chair, my thoughts swimming with confusion and betrayal. How had we gone from renovating our craftsman home together, from planning fertility treatments, from Friday night dates, to this? The man who had proposed in the mountains, who had held me through 2 miscarriages, who had promised we'd build our family when the time was right. Had he been planning this? All along, as I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of what I thought was our life together, I remembered Alejandro Reyes, Victor's boss at Solaris International. The man who had toasted our marriage at dinner parties, who had mentored Victor through his rise to regional director for Latin American markets. If anyone might know something about Victor's strange behavior, it would be Alejandro. I found his business card in Victor's desk drawer and dialed the number with shaking fingers, not knowing that this single phone call would completely alter the course of the next 24 hours. Alejandro Reyes, he answered on the 3rd ring, his voice crisp and professional. Alejandro, it's Sarah, Victor's wife. I struggled to keep my voice from breaking. Sarah? Is everything all right? Victor called. In sick today, which is unusual for him. I took a deep breath. No, everything is not all right. Victor has emptied our bank accounts, all of them, and I've just found a second passport with a visa for Colombia. He didn't come home last night, and I can't reach him. There was a long pause. When Alejandro spoke again, his voice had changed. Sarah, can you come to my office right now? Why? Do you know something? Another pause. I think it's better if we talk in person. There are some things you should know about the company's recent audit findings, things involving Victor's department. My blood ran cold. What things? Please, Sarah. I'm in the office until late tonight. Come as soon as you can. As I drove toward Solaris International's gleaming headquarters, memories of the life Victor and I had built together flooded my mind. Memories that now seemed like scenes from someone else's story, someone else's marriage. Had any of it been real? Or had Victor always been planning his escape, just waiting for the right moment? Before our world collapsed into chaos, Victor and I had what anyone would call an enviable life. We met at a charity gala 12 years ago. I was there representing the architectural firm where I worked, and he was attending with Solaris International executives. Our eyes met across the room in that cliché way I'd always rolled my eyes at in movies. Yet there we were, drawn to each other through a crowded room of strangers. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Victor was charming, ambitious, and attentive. He sent flowers to my office, remembered small details about my preferences, and made me feel like I was the center of his universe. 6 months later, he proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. 1 year after that, we were married in Satidi, a garden ceremony with 100 of our closest friends and family members in attendance. We bought our house in the suburbs 8 years ago, a 2-story craftsman with character and potential. Weekends became renovation projects, with Victor handling the structural work while I designed the spaces. We painted walls together, argued over light fixtures, and compromised on the kitchen backsplash. Every corner of that house contained a memory of our shared dreams. This is the dining room where we'll host Thanksgiving for our families, he'd said, measuring for a table we'd have custom made. This bedroom will make a perfect nursery someday, I'd suggested, and he'd smiled. Pulling me close, our routines were comfortable, established. Victor left for work at 7:15 each morning, kissing me goodbye regardless of whether I was awake or still burrowed under the covers. I worked from my home office as an architectural consultant, taking on projects that allowed me creative freedom, without the constraints of a corporate position. Victor would return home around 6:30, and we'd cook dinner together, talking about our days. "How's the Thompson project going?" he'd ask, chopping vegetables while I stirred sauce on the stove. "They finally approved the sustainable materials budget," I'd reply. "How about the Colombian expansion? moving forward, finally. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Alejandro's giving me a lot of autonomy with this one. Friday nights were sacred. No work, no distractions, just the two of us reconnecting after busy weeks. Sometimes we'd try new restaurants, other times we'd stay home with takeout and a movie. Victor would loosen his tie, kick off his shoes, and become the relaxed, playful man I'd fallen in love with, away from the pressures of corporate expectations. We had a solid group of friends, other couples we'd vacation with, host game nights with, celebrate milestones alongside. Carmen, my sister, adored Victor from the beginning. He's solid, she'd told me after meeting him, the kind of man who shows up when it matters. Our financial situation was stable and steadily improving. Victor's career at Solaris had been on an upward trajectory since he joined the company 15 years ago. Starting in operations management, he'd worked his way up to regional director for Latin American markets, a position that came with significant responsibility and compensation. My freelance work provided a comfortable supplemental income and the flexibility I wanted. We maintained separate personal accounts, but shared a joint account for household expenses and savings goals. Our major financial decisions were always made together. The house purchase, Victor's MBA that we paid for without loans, the vacation property we were saving for. We weren't extravagant, but we traveled well, enjoyed good food, and never worried about meeting our obligations. The challenge in our otherwise picture-perfect life was starting a family. After years of trying naturally, we began seeing fertility specialists. 2 early miscarriages left emotional scars, but Victor remained my rock through the disappointments. He researched treatment options, attended every appointment, and never made me feel like it was my failure when things didn't work out. "We'll be parents when the time is right," he'd assure me, holding me through tears after negative pregnancy tests. "Whether it's through more treatments, surrogacy, or adoption, we'll find our way to a family." The most recent treatment plan was expensive, nearly $45,000 for the recommended approach, but Victor never hesitated. "We'll make it work," he promised. And we had been saving diligently, building the fund that would hopefully bring us the child we both wanted. Perhaps I should have recognized the subtle shifts in our relationship over the past year. The slightly shorter phone calls when he traveled for business. The new password on his phone that he claimed was company security protocol. The late nights that became more frequent, always explained away with work pressures and project deadlines. But when you've built a life with someone, trust becomes as automatic as breathing. I didn't question the changes because I couldn't imagine there was anything to question. Victor had always been ambitious, often taking on more than he should. His growing responsibilities at Solaris meant more stress, more travel, more demands. On his time, it made sense that he seemed more distracted, more tired. "This Colombian expansion is make or break for my career," he'd explained one night when I expressed concern about his workload. "If we pull this off successfully, I'm in line for Vice President of International Operations." I believed him because I had no reason not to. I supported him because that's what we'd always done for each other. I adjusted to seeing less of him, to the occasional missed dinner, to the distracted nods when I spoke about my day. It was temporary, I told myself. Once the expansion was complete, we'd get back to normal. How could I have known that normal no longer existed? That while I was planning our future, Victor was methodically dismantling our past. That the man who held me through fertility treatments was creating an escape route that led away from everything we'd built together. The morning I discovered our emptied accounts was like any other Monday. Nothing in the air, nothing in the quality of light streaming through our kitchen windows. Nothing in the ordinary rhythm of the neighborhood suggested that this day would divide my life into before and after. Looking back now, I can pinpoint exactly when things began to change, though I didn't recognize the significance at the time. It was about 8 months ago, during the annual Solaris International holiday party. Victor had been particularly excited about the event that year, mentioning several times that key partners from Colombia would be attending. "This is my chance to make connections that could help with the expansion," he'd explained while adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. I'd bought him that tie, deep blue with subtle silver threading, for his birthday the previous month. The party was held at the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown, an elegant affair with an open bar and gourmet food stations. Victor was in his element, moving smoothly between groups, introducing me proudly when appropriate, but increasingly leaving me to make my own conversation as the night progressed. "I need to speak with Alejandro and the Colombian delegation," he'd whispered, squeezing my elbow before disappearing into the crowd. I mingled with the spouses of other executives, sipped champagne, and occasionally caught glimpses of Victor, deep in conversation with a striking woman in a red dress. Their body language seemed professional, but there was an intensity to their interaction that made me pause. When I approached them later, Victor's smile seemed slightly forced. "Sarah, meet Ariana Vega from our partner bank in Bogota. She'll be the financial liaison for the expansion project." Ariana's handshake was firm, her smile polite but reserved. "Victor speaks very highly of you," she said, her accent subtle but noticeable. "He says you have an excellent eye for design." "Nice to meet you," I replied. "Victor's been so excited about this Colombian project. It's all he talks about lately." Something flickered in her eyes before she answered. "We're all very excited about the possibilities." Victor placed his hand on the small of my back, a gesture that would normally feel comforting but somehow felt like steering. Ariana was just about to introduce me to the Regulatory Affairs Director. "Would you mind if I—" "Of course not," I said, "because that's what supportive spouses do. I'll find you later." As they walked away, I noticed Ariana lean slightly closer to Victor to say something, and his head tilted toward hers to listen. Just colleagues sharing information in a noisy room, I told myself. Nothing more. But that night marked a shift. Victor came to bed late, claiming he'd been networking until the last minute. When I asked about the Colombian delegation, his answers were enthusiastic but vague. The seeds of distance had been planted, though I wouldn't recognize them as such for months. The changes accumulated slowly after that night. Victor's phone, which had always sat face up on tables or counters, began to remain in his pocket or face down when set aside. He installed a new password management app and changed all his banking passwords, citing a company-wide security protocol after a data breach. "It's not just me," he assured me when I raised an eyebrow. "Everyone at Solaris is updating their security measures. Corporate espionage is a real concern with this expansion." Then came the late nights. Once or twice a week at first, then 3 or 4 times. Always with reasonable explanations. The time difference with Colombia means late calls. The project timeline is accelerating. Alejandro needs the projections by morning. I believed him because distrust requires evidence, and love naturally fills gaps with favorable assumptions. When he missed our anniversary dinner because of a last-minute emergency meeting, I accepted his elaborate apology and the expensive bracelet that followed. When he began taking calls in the bathroom with the shower running, I told myself he was being considerate, not wanting to disturb me with work talk. The first concrete red flag appeared about 5 months ago. I was paying bills when I noticed a charge on our credit card statement from Hotel Esplendor. A $340 dinner on a Tuesday when Victor had told me he was working late at the office. When I asked him about it casually, his explanation came too quickly: client dinner. We were discussing the logistics for equipment transfers to Bogota. He paused, then added, "I submitted it for reimbursement, so you'll see that credit next statement." I checked the next statement. No reimbursement appeared. Then came the weekend trips. Regional office visits that couldn't be rescheduled, team-building retreats that were suddenly mandatory. Each time, Victor would return home with generic stories and small gifts that seemed like afterthoughts, airport souvenirs purchased in haste. During one such weekend, I called his hotel room to wish him good night, only to have the front desk inform me that Mr. Delgado had checked out earlier that day. When I confronted Victor about this upon his return, he claimed a last-minute venue change had moved the retreat to a different hotel, and he'd forgotten to let me know. "You could have called," I said, hating the suspicious tone that had crept into my voice. "I should have," he agreed, looking appropriately contrite. "It was chaotic with everyone changing locations, and by the time we got settled, it was so late I didn't want to disturb you." I let it go. What was the alternative? Accusing my husband of 12 years of lying to me. Of what? Having an affair? Secretly traveling somewhere else? Both seemed absurd compared to the simple explanation of poor communication during a work complication. But my subconscious was gathering evidence my conscious mind refused to acknowledge. I began noticing Victor's reactions when his phone buzzed, with notifications, the slight tensing of his shoulders, the quick checks to see if I was looking, the way he'd step out of rooms to reply to certain messages. Our physical intimacy had cooled as well. Victor still kissed me goodbye each morning, still said, "I love you" before bed, but the passionate connection we'd maintained throughout our marriage had faded. When we did make love, it felt like he was going through motions, his mind elsewhere. Tried to address it directly one evening after yet another perfunctory encounter. "Is everything okay between us? You seem distant lately." Victor rolled toward me, his expression softening in the dim light. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Work has been consuming me. The pressure is intense right now." He traced his finger along my cheek, a familiar gesture that used to make my heart flutter. "Once this expansion is finalized, things will calm down, I promise." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I nodded and curled against his chest, ignoring the stiffness in his embrace and the way he checked his phone the moment he thought I'd fallen asleep. 2 months ago came what should have been the most glaring warning. Victor suggested I postpone our next round of fertility treatments. "The timing isn't great with everything happening at work," he said, carefully arranging his expression into one of regret. "And the stress I'm under right now, it's not ideal for starting a family." It made sense on the surface. We'd agreed to approach parenthood mindfully, to create the best possible environment for a child. But this was the first time in years that Victor had hesitated about our family plans. The fertility specialist had told us not to delay given my history and age. Every month mattered. "We've been saving for this for so long," I argued gently. "And Dr. Michaels said this protocol has the highest success rate for our situation." "Just a few months," Victor insisted. "Let's reevaluate in the summer when the Colombian deal is finalized." I reluctantly agreed, ignoring the voice in my head. That whispered this wasn't about timing at all. The truth was, by suggesting the delay, Victor had inadvertently protected our fertility fund from his eventual theft. Those designated savings were in an account under my name alone, the only money he couldn't easily access. The final sign came just weeks before everything collapsed. Victor asked, with unusual insistence, about my plans for visiting Carmen. "You should go for the whole weekend," he urged. "You deserve a break from all my work stress, and you know how much you love spending time with your niece." His encouragement seemed genuine, caring even. I was touched by his apparent thoughtfulness. It never occurred to me that he was creating the perfect opportunity to execute the final stage of his plan. To empty our accounts and disappear while I was hundreds of miles away, completely unaware. And so I went to Phoenix, texting Victor photos of my niece's birthday celebrations, completely oblivious to the fact that back home, my husband was systematically destroying the financial foundation of our life together, preparing to vanish with another woman to a country where he thought I couldn't follow. The signs had been there all along. I just couldn't bear to read them. Solaris International's headquarters loomed ahead as I pulled into the visitor parking area. The gleaming 40-story building had always impressed me before, a monument to success that Victor spoke of with pride. Now it felt ominous, holding secrets I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. The security guard at the front desk, Julian, who knew me from company events, gave me a sympathetic look that immediately set my nerves on edge. Did everyone know something? I didn't. "Mrs. Delgado," he said, his voice gentler than usual. "Mr. Reyes is expecting you. You can go right up." The elevator ride to the executive floor gave me too much time with my thoughts. A voice in my head kept insisting there must be some explanation. Victor wouldn't just abandon our life together. There had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding, some elaborate miscommunication that would clear everything up. Maybe he'd made a large investment without telling me first. Impulsive? Yes, but fixable. Maybe he was planning a surprise, something extravagant and ill-advised but well-intentioned. Maybe his phone was broken and he was desperately trying to reach me from somewhere. The scenarios grew increasingly implausible as the elevator climbed, but I clung to them. Because the alternative, that my husband of 12 years had methodically planned to steal our savings and disappear, was too painful to accept. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area where Alejandro's assistant, Lucia, sat at a sleek desk. She looked up with a start when she saw me, her professional composure slipping for just a moment. "Mrs. Delgado," she said, standing quickly. "Mr. Reyes asked me to bring you straight in when you arrived." She led me through heavy double doors, into Alejandro's corner office with its panoramic views of the city. Under different circumstances, I might have paused to admire the skyline, the subtle luxury of the furnishings, the careful curation of art on the walls. Instead, my focus narrowed to Alejandro's face as he rose from behind his desk. His expression was grave, his typically confident demeanor subdued. Without a word, he gestured to a sitting area rather than directing me to the chair across from his imposing desk. A small kindness I barely registered. "Sarah," he said as we sat down, "before I say anything else, I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and we will do everything we can to help you through it." The knot in my stomach tightened. Only bad news required such a preface. "Just tell me what's happening, Alejandro. What does Victor's disappearance have to do with Solaris?" He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. 3 weeks ago, our finance department flagged some irregularities in international wire transfers. Funds earmarked for our Bogotá expansion were being rerouted through a series of shell companies before reaching their intended recipients. My mind flashed to Victor at his desk late at night, surrounded by spreadsheets, insisting he needed privacy to concentrate. At first, we thought it might be an issue with our Colombian banking partners, Alejandro continued. But our audit team traced the pattern back to its source. He paused, his expression pained. The transactions were being manipulated from within Solaris, specifically from Victor's department. I felt oddly calm, as if I were floating slightly above the scene, watching someone else receive this news. "Are you saying Victor was stealing from the company?" Alejandro nodded grimly. "We estimate the total amount at close to $2 million over the past 6 months. The method was sophisticated. Small percentages skimmed from large transfers, legitimate expenses inflated by 20 or 30% with the difference diverted. Nothing that would immediately raise alarms. $2 million. The number seemed impossibly large, disconnected from the man who had fretted over our household budget, who had insisted we save aggressively for retirement, who had calculated the optimal mortgage payment to balance current comfort with future security. We were building a case quietly, Alejandro continued, gathering evidence before confronting him. We had planned to bring him in tomorrow for questioning, with legal counsel present. He shook his head. But it appears someone tipped him off. Our IT security team detected an unauthorized remote access to the audit files over the weekend, while I was in Phoenix. While I was sending Victor photos of my niece's birthday cake, He was discovering that his scheme had been uncovered. While I was hugging Carmen goodbye, he was finalizing his escape. "So he took your money," I said, my voice hollow. "And then he took mine." "I'm deeply sorry, Sarah." Alejandro's voice was heavy with genuine regret. "If there had been any indication, he would target your personal finances. We would have warned you immediately." I nodded mechanically, unable to form a response that made sense. My mind kept circling back to one question. "Why?" I finally asked. "Victor made an excellent salary. We lived comfortably. Why would he risk everything for money he didn't even need?" Alejandro hesitated, exchanging a look with Lucia, who had quietly entered with a folder. The silent communication between them sent a chill through me. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked. Alejandro took the folder from Lucia and placed it on the coffee table between us, not opening it. "Our investigation uncovered communication between Victor and a financial officer at our partner bank in Bogotá, Ariana Vega, the woman from the holiday party, the striking woman in the red dress whose name had occasionally peppered Victor's work stories. Always professional mentions, always in the context of the expansion project." The communications started professionally, Alejandro continued carefully, but became personal in nature over time. Personal. Such a neutral word for what he was actually saying. "He's been having an affair." The words came out flat, a statement rather than a question. "We believe so, yes. And we have reason to think Ms. Vega is involved in the financial irregularities as well. Her position at the bank would have given her the access needed to help conceal the diverted funds." My mind flashed to all those late-night calls Victor had taken in private. The weekend, work. Trips that couldn't be rescheduled. The growing distance between us that I'd attributed to work stress. All along, it had been her. Them. Planning not just financial theft, but the theft of our entire future. Alejandro opened the folder, revealing what appeared to be bank statements. "We've traced the majority of the embezzled funds to an account, registered to a company called Sunrise Investments. It was established in Panama 3 months ago. Sunrise Investments. The same name on the transfers from our personal accounts. It wasn't just parallel schemes, it was one coordinated plan. The timing suggests they've been planning this exit strategy for months," Alejandro said. "Creating offshore accounts, establishing shell companies, preparing for a clean break. A clean break. As if 12 years of marriage, a home built together, dreams of a family, could be severed so clinically. As if I were just another loose end to be tidied away." "What happens now?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Solaris has already notified the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Corporate theft of this magnitude is a federal offense." Alejandro leaned forward, his expression intent. "But Sarah, if Victor has fled the country, recovery becomes much more complicated. Colombia's extradition procedures can be lengthy, especially in financial cases." The weight of reality was finally sinking in. My husband was gone. Our savings were gone. And there was no quick fix. No immediate resolution that would restore what had been stolen. Not just our money, but my trust, my security, my understanding of the life I'd been living. "I need a moment," I said quietly. Alejandro nodded, standing. "Of course, I'll give you some privacy. There's water on the sidebar if you need it. Take all the time you need." When the door closed behind him, I finally allowed the tears to come. Not dramatic sobs, but silent streams that traced the contours of a face I no longer recognized in my mind's eye. Who was I now? The woman who had been comprehensively deceived by the person she trusted most? The victim of an elaborate fraud disguised as a marriage? No, I wouldn't accept those identities. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, anger beginning to replace the shock that had carried me through the morning. Victor had taken enough. He wouldn't take my dignity or my agency, too. I reached for the folder Alejandro had left, determined to understand exactly what I was facing. If this was my new reality, I would face it with clear eyes, no matter how painful the details. The folder contained page after page of damning evidence. Bank transfers with Victor's digital signature. Email exchanges with Ariana discussing transfer schedules, carefully worded but clear in their intent. A timeline meticulously assembled by Solaris's forensic accounting team showing the gradual escalation of theft, small amounts at first, growing bolder as success bred confidence. Most disturbing was a printout of a text message exchange between Victor and Ariana from just 2 weeks ago. Actor, everything in place. S visiting her sister first weekend in April. Perfect window. Ariana, tickets confirmed. Villa viewing scheduled for the 15th. Time to start our real life. Victor, can't wait to wake up with you without having to leave. I stared at those words until they blurred. Our real life. As if our marriage had been some kind of holding pattern, a temporary arrangement until something better came along. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. When Alejandro returned, I had composed myself, the initial shock hardening into something colder and more focused. I need to know everything, I said before he could speak. Not just about the company, theft, but about their plans, their communications, anything that might help me find them. Alejandro sat down, his expression careful. The FBI will be handling the investigation now. They have resources we don't. The FBI cares about the $2 million. I care about my life savings and the man who stole them. My voice remained steady. There must be something in all this data that points to where they're going. Alejandro hesitated, then nodded. There are some patterns. The property searches on Victor's company computer were focused on a specific region. Cartagena on Colombia's Caribbean coast. Luxury properties mostly. Show me, I demanded. He turned his laptop toward me, pulling up a folder of flagged browser history. Images of sprawling villas with ocean views, private pools, and gated security filled the screen. Properties with price tags between $1 and $3 million. My throat tightened as I realized our emptied accounts were likely just a down payment on one of these retreats. The stolen corporate funds would finance the rest. And their travel plans? You mentioned tickets. We don't have specifics, only that text message reference. Our security team is working with the airline partners to... My phone buzzed with an incoming email, interrupting him. I glanced down automatically, then froze when I saw the sender. Victor. He just emailed me, I said, my fingers suddenly clumsy, as I opened the message. Sarah, by now you've discovered the transfers. I know you're hurt and angry, and you have every right to be. This isn't how I wanted things to end. The truth is, I've been unhappy for years. We've been going through the motions, living parallel lives under the same roof. I found someone who truly understands me, who shares my vision for the future. I've left you the house and your car, the furniture, everything in it. It's all yours. I've only taken what I need for my fresh start. It's more than fair. Please don't try to find me. By the time you read this, I'll be somewhere you can't reach. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I did care about you, in my way. Victor. I read it twice, a strange calm settling over me. The audacity was almost impressive, positioning himself as generous for not stealing the furniture, suggesting our marriage had been mutually unfulfilling, offering the feeble consolation that he cared in his way. Without a word, I handed my phone to Alejandro, who read the message with a deepening frown. He's trying to discourage you from pursuing this, he said, returning my phone. It's a tactic. Making it seem like a clean break is your best option. He's wrong, I said simply. Alejandro nodded, something like approval crossing his features. The FBI agents will be here within the hour. They'll want to interview you, get access to your accounts, understand the full scope of both the corporate and personal theft. The thought of explaining our marital history, our finances, our private life to federal agents made my stomach clench, but I nodded. Whatever it takes. Alejandro's phone rang. He checked the display and stood quickly. It's our head of security. Excuse me a moment. While he took the call by the window, I scrolled through Victor's email again, searching for anything useful between the lines of his calculated goodbye. The tone was too confident, too certain he was beyond reach. That suggested he believed his plan was foolproof, that he was either already out of the country or had guaranteed means to leave imminently. Alejandro returned, his expression animated with fresh urgency. Our security team just received an alert. Victor's company credit card was just used at a gas station on the Northern Highway, about 40 minutes from here. My pulse quickened. He's still in the country? It appears so. I've asked security to pull the surveillance footage from the gas station. If we can confirm it's him, we need to go there, I interrupted, already standing. Now, before the trail goes cold. Alejandro hesitated. Sarah, this isn't a matter for civilians. The FBI will be an hour behind us. I know my husband, Alejandro. I know how he thinks. I might see something they would miss. I gathered my purse, my determination mounting. You can stay here and wait if you want, but I'm going. He studied me for a moment, then nodded sharply. I'll drive. 20 minutes later, we were in Alejandro's sleek black Mercedes, speeding toward the gas station. The highway stretched before us, a concrete ribbon leading north toward the state border. My mind raced faster than the car, cycling through possibilities. If Victor was still in the country, why? His meticulous planning suggested he should have been long gone. Had something gone wrong with their escape plan? Was he meeting Ariana somewhere before their final departure? Do you think she's with him? I asked, breaking the tense silence in the car. Alejandro kept his eyes on the road. Possibly. Our security team is checking if she's still in Colombia or if she's traveled here. Border Control has been notified to watch for both their passports. Has too, I said. I found a second passport hidden in his office at home. It's new, issued just 3 months ago. Alejandro's grip tightened on the steering wheel. A duplicate identity? That's concerning. It means he might try to cross borders under different credentials. The implications were sinking in. This wasn't just opportunistic theft. It was an elaborate scheme with international complications. Victor and Ariana weren't just running away together. They were establishing new lives with stolen millions in a country where they thought they'd be untouchable. My phone rang, Carmen's name lighting up the screen. I had texted her earlier with a brief, sanitized version of events. Victor and I, having serious issues. We'll explain later. I wasn't ready to tell her everything. I can't talk right now, I answered quickly. I'm in the middle of something important. Sarah, what's going on? Your message freaked me out. I promise I'll call you tonight. I can't explain right now. Are you safe? Her voice was tight with concern. I glanced at Alejandro, at the determined set of his jaw as he navigated traffic with focused precision. Yes, I'm safe. I'm with Victor's boss. We're trying to sort things out. Sort what out? Sarah, you're scaring me. I have to go. I love you. I ended the call before she could press further, silencing my phone as it immediately began ringing. Again. Alejandro gave me a sidelong glance. You'll need to tell your family eventually. Eventually, I agreed, but right now I need to focus on finding Victor. We fell silent as the GPS announced we were 5 minutes from the gas station. I stared out the window at the passing landscape, suburban developments giving way to more rural settings. Victor and I had talked about buying property out this way. Someday, a weekend retreat with space for future children to run, to plant a garden, to host family gatherings. Had any of those conversations been genuine? Or had he been playing a role all along, pretending to share dreams he never intended to fulfill? The gas station appeared ahead, a modern facility with multiple pumps and a convenience store. Alejandro pulled in, parking near the entrance rather than at a fuel island. "Let me do the talking," he said as we exited the car. "Solaris has significant corporate accounts with this chain. They'll be cooperative." Inside, the manager, a balding man with a name tag reading Pedro, recognized Alejandro immediately. The corporate world's hierarchies extended further than I had realized. "Mr. Reyes, what can I do for you?" Pedro asked, his demeanor instantly deferential. "We need to see your security footage from approximately 1 hour ago," Alejandro stated, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "One of our executives used his corporate card here, and we need to verify some details." Pedro nodded, leading us to a small office behind the counter. "Of course, sir. Our system stores 24 hours of footage. Do you know which pump he used?" Alejandro consulted his phone. "The transaction shows pump 4 at 10:14 a.m. Pedro typed commands into an outdated computer, and grainy footage appeared on the monitor. He scrolled back through the timeline, stopping when the counter showed 10:12 a.m., and there he was. Victor, in a dark jacket I'd never seen before, baseball cap pulled low, but unmistakably my husband. He was filling a black SUV, not our car, not his company vehicle. A rental, perhaps, or purchased with stolen funds, but it wasn't Victor who made my breath catch. It was the woman who emerged from the passenger side and walked into the convenience store. Ariana Vega, the woman from the holiday party, the financial liaison who had become so much more. She moved with confidence, sunglasses, perched on top of her head, apparently unconcerned about being recognized. They weren't running scared. They were executing a plan they believed was foolproof. "Can you follow her inside?" I asked Pedro. He nodded, switching to interior cameras. We watched as Ariana selected snacks, bottled water, and what appeared to be a map. "Road trip provisions. They're driving?" I said, turning to Alejandro. "Not flying. They're taking a land route out of the country." Alejandro was already on his phone. "I need to alert the FBI and Border Patrol immediately. Can we see which direction they headed after leaving?" I asked Pedro, my heart pounding with a strange mix of dread and determination. He nodded, switching to an exterior camera that captured the gas station exit. We watched as the black SUV pulled out, turning right, continuing north. "There are 3 major border crossings if they keep heading that direction," Alejandro said, still on the phone with someone from his security team. "But they'd be foolish to use an official crossing point with their identities flagged." A thought struck me. "Can we go back to when they first arrived? I want to see if they came from the south or the north." Pedro rewound the footage. The SUV appeared from the left side of the frame, coming from the south, from the direction of the city. They weren't returning from somewhere. They were just beginning their journey. "Is there any way to get the license plate number?" I asked, leaning closer to the grainy screen. Pedro adjusted the image, zooming in and enhancing as best the outdated system allowed. The plate came into focus. A rental car, judging by the distinctive tag format. Alejandro immediately relayed the information to his security team, who would pass it to the FBI. "If they're in a rental vehicle, we can track it. Most agencies install GPS in their fleets now." My focus remained on the footage, watching Victor's movements. There was something methodical about him, something I recognized from our years together. When Victor was executing a plan, he had a particular way of moving, efficient, focused, with no wasted motion. I was seeing that now as he filled the gas tank, checked the tire pressure, cleaned the windshield. "He's being thorough," I murmured, "making sure the vehicle is in perfect condition for a long drive." "That fits with a border run," Alejandro agreed, ending his call. "The FBI is mobilizing, but they're at least 30 minutes behind us. They've requested we stay here until they arrive." I shook my head. They'll be too late. Victor and Ariana already have at least a 40-minute head start, and they're moving fast. I pointed to the timestamp on the footage. "Look how quickly they completed their stop. Under 7 minutes for..." gas, supplies, and a bathroom break. They're not lingering. A debate played across Alejandro's features: follow protocol or follow the lead. Finally, he nodded. You're right. We can at least drive in their direction, see if we spot the vehicle. The FBI can catch up to us on the road. We thanked Pedro, who promised to preserve the footage for the authorities, and hurried back to Alejandro's Mercedes. As we pulled onto the highway heading north, Alejandro's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Mr. Reyes, this is Agent Bowers with the FBI. I understand you've located the subject's vehicle. We have surveillance footage and a license plate for a black SUV headed north from the North Star gas station on Highway 41. We're currently following that route while maintaining a safe distance. We appreciate your assistance, but I need to be clear. Do not engage with the subjects. They're wanted for federal financial crimes and should be considered potentially dangerous. Our team is en route to your location. Understood, Agent Bowers. We're simply tracking their likely route to provide you with intelligence. As Alejandro continued his conversation with the agent, I found myself staring at the highway stretching before us, trying to think like Victor. Where exactly was he heading? The most obvious border crossings would surely be watched now. Victor was too smart to drive directly into a trap. My thoughts were interrupted by another call coming through on Alejandro's phone. He switched over. Mr. Reyes, this is Lucia. I've been reviewing Mr. Delgado's recent expenses as you requested. There's something strange I thought you should know immediately. Go ahead, Lucia. There's a charge from 3 weeks ago at Mountain Creek Marina. It's listed as client entertainment, but it's a substantial amount, $4,200. Marina. The word hit me like a lightning bolt. They're not driving to a border crossing, I said, the realization crystallizing. They're headed to a marina. They're leaving by boat. Alejandro looked at me sharply. Are you certain? It makes perfect sense. Victor knows his passport would be flagged at airports and land crossings. But private boats, much less scrutiny, especially at smaller marinas. And he's always been comfortable on the water. He crewed in college. Lucia, can you pull up the exact details of that marina charge? What exactly was he paying for? One moment, sir. We heard keyboard clicks in the background. It's listed as a slip rental and maintenance services for a vessel named Nuevo Amanecer, New Dawn, in Spanish. A chill ran through me. Victor didn't speak Spanish. At least he hadn't until recently, when he'd started those language apps for the Colombia project. When is the rental period? Alejandro asked, more typing. It's a 3-month contract starting 3 weeks ago. I met Alejandro's gaze. That's their escape vessel. They're not driving to the border. They're driving to the marina. Alejandro immediately relayed this information to Agent Bowers, who was still on the other line. The agent's response was immediate. We're redirecting units to Mountain Creek Marina. It's approximately 90 minutes north of your current position. Do not approach the marina yourselves. I repeat, do not approach. Understood, Alejandro replied, but I could see determination settling in his expression. We were closer than the FBI, much closer. As we continued north, my phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. I opened it cautiously. I know you're following us. Turn around and go home, Sarah. Some things aren't worth chasing. My blood ran cold. Victor knew we were coming. But how? I showed the message to Alejandro, whose jaw tightened. He might have someone watching the gas station security feeds remotely. Or what? Or he has access to Solaris's security systems and is monitoring our communications. Alejandro hit the steering wheel in frustration. I should have considered that possibility. As regional director, he had high-level clearance. The implications were serious. If Victor could monitor Solaris communications, he knew the FBI was involved. He knew we'd identified his escape route. He knew exactly how much time he had to reach the boat and disappear. Alejandro made a sudden decision, pulling off at the next exit. We need to switch vehicles and change our approach. If he's tracking my car or my phone, we're leading him straight to our moves. The exit led to a small shopping center. Alejandro parked behind a restaurant, turning to me with grim determination. We have two options. Wait for the FBI to handle this, which is the safer choice. Or continue on our own, which is risky, but might be our only chance to catch them before they reach the marina. I didn't hesitate. I didn't come this far to stop. Now? But we need transportation. Alejandro nodded, pulling out his wallet and extracting a wad of cash. I keep emergency funds, enough to rent a car without using cards that could be traced. 20 minutes later, we were back on the highway in a nondescript gray sedan rented from a local agency with cash and Alejandro's backup ID. Both our phones were turned off and stored in the glove compartment to prevent any potential tracking. The marina is about an hour from here if we maintain this speed, Alejandro said, pushing the rental car faster than was strictly legal. We have to assume Victor and Ariana know we've identified their destination. I gripped the door handle, my mind racing through scenarios. If they reach that boat before we do, they'll be gone. International waters, then on to wherever they've planned. Colombia, probably. Maybe beyond. The FBI has alerted the Coast Guard, but locating a single vessel once it's out in open water. Alejandro didn't need to finish the thought. We drove, intense silence, each mile bringing us closer to what felt like the final confrontation. I found myself thinking about the Victor I thought I knew, the man who had wooed me at that charity gala, who had built a life with me, who had held me through miscarriages and celebrated promotions and renovated our home. Had any of it been real? Or had I been living with a stranger who wore my husband's face? The gray sedan ate up the miles as we sped north, racing against both Victor's head start and the ticking clock of my own doubts. I had never considered myself a confrontational person. In our marriage, I had been the peacemaker, the one who sought compromise. Now I was hurtling toward a showdown I couldn't fully imagine. What exactly are we going to do if we find them? I asked finally. We're not law enforcement. We can't arrest them. Alejandro's hands tightened on the steering wheel. We can delay them. Create a disturbance, alert marina security, anything to keep them from boarding that boat until the FBI arrives. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. As we approached the marina area, Alejandro slowed, taking back roads to approach from an unexpected direction. Mountain Creek Marina came into view, a sprawling facility with several docks extending into a large lake that eventually connected to the river system and, ultimately, the ocean. There, I said, pointing to the parking area. The black SUV. Alejandro pulled over immediately, parking behind a maintenance building where our car wouldn't be immediately visible. We were just in time. Through the chain-link fence surrounding the marina, I could see Victor and Ariana unloading bags from the SUV, moving with the urgent efficiency of people who knew they were being pursued. They're heading for the docks, Alejandro said, pulling out binoculars from the rental car's compartment. Slip 42, according to the records. That would be on the far eastern dock. I strained to see through the fence. Victor and Ariana were now making their way down the main dock, each carrying duffel bags and what looked like provisions for a journey. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in Victor's posture, the way he kept checking over his shoulder. There's a pedestrian entrance over there, I said, pointing to a gate about 50 yards away. But we'll need a key card or something to get in. Alejandro was already moving. Follow me. I have an idea. We approached the marina entrance, where a small office housed the management staff. Through the window, I could see an older man behind the counter, helping another customer. Alejandro straightened his tie, transforming instantly from our frantic chase into the poised executive I'd seen at company functions. Let me handle this, he murmured as we entered. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, incongruous with the storm of emotions raging inside me. The office smelled of coffee and sunscreen, with fishing trophies mounted on the walls and brochures for local attractions fanned out on a side table. Such ordinary details in what felt like the most extraordinary moment of my life. "Good afternoon," Alejandro said smoothly once the other customer had left. "I'm here regarding the vessel Nuevo Amanecer. There seems to be an urgent issue with the registration." The manager, his nameplate read Frank, frowned slightly. "Nuevo Amanecer? That would be Mr. Delgado's boat. Slip 42. Is there a problem?" "I'm afraid so," Alejandro continued, producing a business card that identified him as CEO of Solaris International. "Mr. Delgado is an executive at my company, and we've discovered some concerning financial irregularities. The vessel may have been purchased with misappropriated corporate funds." Frank's eyebrows shot up. That's above my pay grade, sir." "We understand. We simply need access to speak with Mr. Delgado, who should be at the boat now. It's a sensitive matter we'd prefer to handle privately before authorities become involved." The mention of authorities seemed to sway Frank, who nodded and reached for a set of key cards. "I can escort you to the dock." "That won't be necessary," Alejandro said smoothly. "We know where it is, and this is a delicate corporate matter." Frank hesitated, then handed over 2 visitor passes. "Just return these when you're done, and if there's any trouble—" "You'll be the first to know," Alejandro assured him, taking the passes with a confident smile. As we hurried through the gate and onto the main dock, I felt a strange detachment settle over me. Here I was, chasing my husband and his lover as they attempted to flee with stolen millions. It was like something from a movie, not the life of Sarah Delgado, architectural consultant, who until yesterday had been planning fertility treatments and kitchen renovations. "Are you all right?" Alejandro asked, noticing my expression as we navigated between rows of boats. "I don't know what I am," I answered honestly. "Angry, hurt, shocked. But mostly, I just need answers." We rounded a corner and Slip 42 came into view. Moored there was a gleaming white yacht, perhaps 40 feet long, with the name Nuevo Amanecer painted in elegant script on the stern. It wasn't enormous, but it was certainly large enough for an ocean crossing with 2 people. And there, on the deck, were Victor and Ariana stowing their bags and making final preparations. They hadn't seen us yet, focused as they were on their departure. I stopped abruptly, suddenly frozen. This was real. My husband, the man I had built a life with, shared a bed with, planned a family with, was escaping to a new life with another woman and our money. The abstract knowledge became visceral reality as I watched him move around the deck with comfortable familiarity, occasionally touching Ariana's arm or waist with the casual intimacy of established lovers. A wave of nausea swept through me, followed by a surge of rage so intense it made my vision blur at the edges. 12 years. 12 years of my life invested in a marriage that had apparently meant nothing to him. Fertility treatments we'd researched together, while he was planning his escape. Anniversary celebrations that he'd endured while building a relationship. With another woman. Sarah? Alejandro's voice seemed to come from far away. "The FBI is still at least 15 minutes out. We need to delay them somehow." I nodded mechanically, unable to tear my eyes from the scene on the boat. Victor was smiling now, saying something to Ariana that made her laugh and lean into him. They looked happy, carefree, as if they weren't standing on a foundation of theft and betrayal. Without fully forming a plan, I started walking toward the slip. Alejandro grabbed my arm. "Wait," he hissed. "We need to be strategic." But strategy had evaporated under the heat of my fury. I shook off his hand and continued forward, my steps loud and deliberate on the wooden planks of the dock. Victor heard them first. He turned, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he recognized me. For a split second, I saw something like guilt cross his features before a mask of cold determination replaced it. "Sarah?" he said, his voice carrying across the short distance between us. "You shouldn't have come here." "Apparently there are a lot of things I shouldn't have done," I I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Trusting you is at the top of that list. Ariana had stepped closer to Victor now, her hand on his arm in a gesture that was both possessive and supportive. She was even more beautiful up close, younger than me, with a confidence that radiated from her perfectly composed features. "This is pointless," Victor said, his tone clipped. "You can't stop us, and you're only making this more difficult for yourself." "More difficult?" I repeated, incredulous. "You stole our life savings. You embezzled from your company. You're fleeing the country with a woman you've been having an affair with. And you think I'm making things difficult?" Victor's jaw tightened. "I left you the house, the car. It's more than fair." The audacity stunned me into momentary silence. More than fair. As if our marriage had been a business arrangement he could liquidate at will, tossing me a few assets as settlement. "You left me with nothing," I said, stepping closer to the edge of the dock. "You took money I earned, money my father left me when he died, money we were saving for fertility treatments, treatments you encouraged me to pursue while planning. Your escape." "It wasn't working, Sarah," Victor said, his voice softening into something almost like pity. "Our marriage, our plans, it was all going through the motions. You must have felt it too." "Don't," I warned, my voice dropping dangerously. "Don't you dare try to rewrite our marriage to justify what you've done." Ariana spoke then, her accented English precise and cool. "Victor, we need to go. The tide will change soon." The casual way she used his name, the easy authority in her tone, it made something snap inside me. This woman had helped dismantle my life, stolen my future, and now stood there urging my husband to hurry their escape. "Did he tell you he was married when you first got involved?" I asked her directly. "Or did that come later, after you'd already planned how to steal from Solaris together?" A flicker of discomfort crossed her features. "Our relationship is not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I countered. "A affair built on lies and theft. Quite the foundation for your real life together." Victor started to untie the mooring line, his movements quick and practiced. "The FBI is coming, aren't they? That's why you're here, trying to stall us." "They know everything," Alejandro said, stepping forward. "The embezzlement, the offshore accounts, the planned escape. Every border crossing and port authority has your names and descriptions. There's nowhere you can go where this won't follow you." Victor's eyes narrowed as he registered Alejandro's presence. "You too? I expected this from my wife, but you, after everything I've done for Solaris?" "After everything you've stolen from Solaris," Alejandro corrected sharply. $2 million, Victor. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" A cold smile spread across Victor's face. "No, I knew you'd notice eventually. I just planned to be long gone by then." He turned to Ariana. "Start the engines." She disappeared into the cabin, and moments later, the yacht's engines rumbled to life. Victor finished untying the mooring lines, tossing them onto the dock with practiced efficiency. "Victor, please," I said, hating the plea in my voice but unable to stop myself. "If you leave like this, there's no coming back. You'll be a fugitive. Is that really the life you want?" For a moment, just a moment, something like doubt crossed his features. Then he glanced toward the cabin where Ariana waited, and his resolve hardened. "Goodbye, Sarah," he said, stepping away from the edge of the boat as it began to drift from the dock. "I'm sorry it ended this way." The yacht was moving now, pulling away from the slip with increasing speed. In moments they would be beyond reach, headed for open water and escape. I looked at Alejandro, desperation rising. "We can't let them leave. The FBI won't get here in time." His expression was grim. "I know." And that's when we heard it, the distinctive wail of sirens in the distance, growing louder by the second. The yacht was already several yards from the dock, its engines rumbling louder as it gained speed. Victor stood at the helm with Ariana beside him, both of them looking back at the dock where I stood with Alejandro. Despite the distance, I could see the moment Victor registered the sound of approaching sirens, his expression shifting from triumph to calculation. "They're going to make a run for it," Alejandro said, already reaching for his phone. "I need to tell the FBI exactly where to intercept them on the water." But I was no longer listening. My attention had been caught by a small speedboat docked 2 slips down, its keys dangling in the ignition. The owner was nearby, loading fishing gear into a truck in the parking lot, clearly finished for the day and preparing to leave. Without fully processing my actions, I moved toward the boat. Alejandro's voice followed me. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "We can't let them get away," I called back, already stepping into the speedboat. "Not with everything they've taken." "Sarah, this is insane. You can't just take someone's boat." But I could, and I was. 12 years of playing by the rules had led me here, standing on a dock watching my husband escape with another woman and our life savings. Sometimes the rules needed to be broken. I'd never operated a boat on my own, but I'd been on plenty with Victor over the years. He'd even let me take the wheel occasionally, explaining the basics of navigation and control. It couldn't be that different from driving a car, I reasoned, turning the key and feeling a surge of satisfaction as the engine roared to life. "Tell the FBI we're in pursuit," I called to Alejandro, who stood frozen on the dock, astonishment clear on his face, "and apologize to the owner for me." With that, I untied the moorings and pushed away from the dock, turning the throttle gradually to build speed in the direction Victor's yacht had headed. Behind me, I could hear Alejandro shouting something, but his words were lost to the wind and engine noise as I accelerated. The speedboat cut through the water with exhilarating velocity, far faster than Victor's larger vessel. Within minutes, I was gaining on them, the distance closing rapidly. I could see Victor at the wheel now, looking back with increasing frequency, his face a mask of disbelief as he registered what was happening. I had no plan beyond catching up to them. I wasn't armed, wasn't trained in maritime pursuit tactics. But something primal had awakened in me, a refusal to be the passive victim in this story. I might not be able to stop them physically, but I could bear witness. I could look my husband in the eye as he betrayed everything we'd built together. As I drew closer, I could see Ariana pointing at me, her expression alarmed. Victor nodded and suddenly veered the yacht sharply to the right, heading toward a narrower channel that branched off from the main waterway. It was a tactical move. The channel was likely too shallow or narrow for larger vessels to follow, which would delay the Coast Guard or police boats. But my smaller speedboat could manage it easily. I adjusted course, maintaining pursuit. The channel was indeed narrower, lined with reeds and low-hanging branches from trees that crowded the banks. The wake from Victor's yacht bounced back from the closer shores, creating choppy water that made my speedboat bounce and slam against the surface. I gripped the wheel tighter, reducing speed just enough to maintain control without losing them. Ahead, I could see Victor gesturing animatedly to Ariana, who disappeared below deck momentarily, before returning with what looked like a small bag. Even from this distance, I could recognize it. The vintage leather satchel that had been a gift from my father, which Victor had appropriated years ago for important documents. "That's my family's money in there," I muttered through gritted teeth, pushing the throttle forward again. "You don't get to take that too." The channel widened slightly as it approached a small bay area. Beyond it, I could see open water, the larger lake that would eventually give them access to the river system and, ultimately, international waters. If they reached that point before authorities arrived, their chances of escape increased dramatically. Was close enough now that I could clearly see both their faces when they turned to look back at me. Victor's expression was a mixture of anger and disbelief. He had never expected this kind of pursuit from me, the wife who compromised, who avoided confrontation, who trusted him implicitly. Ariana looked genuinely afraid, clutching the railing. As she stared back at the speedboat rapidly gaining on them, the sirens were louder now, coming from multiple directions. Through gaps in the trees, I caught glimpses of flashing lights approaching the marina we'd left behind. The FBI had arrived, but they were still too far away to intercept Victor before he reached open water. It was down to me. As we entered the small bay, I made a decision. Angling the speedboat directly toward the yacht's path, I increased speed significantly. I wasn't aiming to ram them. That would be recklessly dangerous. But I could cut across their bow close enough to force Victor to make a choice. Swerve to avoid collision or maintain course and risk both our vessels. It was a gamble based on one fundamental belief. Despite everything, Victor wouldn't want to physically harm me. He had stolen, lied, betrayed, but he wasn't violent. I was counting on that remaining true. "What are you doing?" I heard him shout across the narrowing gap between our vessels. "Are you crazy?" Perhaps I was, but I was also determined. As my speedboat cut diagonally across his path, Victor had the choice. I'd predicted. He cursed loudly enough for me to hear, and swerved hard to avoid collision, sending his yacht lurching toward the shallower water near the bay's edge. The sudden maneuver was too extreme. I heard the sickening crunch of the yacht's hull connecting with something underwater, likely a submerged rock or tree stump. The larger vessel shuddered visibly, its forward momentum arrested by the impact. I circled back, slowing the speedboat and keeping a safe distance. Victor was shouting at Ariana, now, both of them moving frantically around the deck, checking the damage. From what I could see, the yacht was taking on water, not rapidly enough to sink immediately, but enough to prevent them from continuing their escape. I cut the speedboat's engine, letting it drift closer to the stricken yacht. The sudden silence felt heavy after the roar of both engines. "It's over, Victor," I called across the water. "The FBI is here. There's nowhere left to run." His face when he looked at me was unrecognizable, contorted with a fury I had never seen in 12 years of marriage. "You've ruined everything," he snarled. "No," I replied calmly. "You did that when you decided to steal our future." Ariana was now frantically gathering bags, clearly preparing to abandon the damaged yacht. "We can still make it," she urged Victor, "if we take the small craft." She pointed to a tender, a small auxiliary boat secured at the stern of the yacht. Victor looked torn, glancing between Ariana and the approaching lights of what were likely Coast Guard or police vessels entering the bay from the opposite side. "Don't," I said, reading his intentions. "They'll catch you anyway, and it will only make things worse." For a moment I thought he might listen. Then he turned away, helping Ariana lower the tender into the water. They were really going to try it. A desperate final attempt to escape justice. As they clambered into the small boat, Victor clutching the leather satchel that likely contained cash or valuables, I could hear the unmistakable sound of approaching boats. Through the trees, 2 Coast Guard vessels appeared, lights flashing, entering the bay from the main lakeside. Victor saw them too. He froze, the tender bobbing in the water beside the damaged yacht, Ariana already seated with their most essential bags. This was his last moment to choose, surrender with some dignity or risking everything in a futile escape attempt. I held my breath, suddenly realizing how much I still wanted him to make the right choice, even after everything. Some small part of me still cared what happened to the man I had loved for 12 years, still hoped there was something redeemable beneath the betrayal. Our eyes met across the water. In that moment, I saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of the man I thought I knew. Resignation, possibly even remorse. Then the moment passed, and Victor stepped back onto the yacht, helping Ariana back aboard as well. He raised his hand slowly as the Coast Guard vessels approached, their loudspeakers ordering both vessels to remain in position. It was over. Not in the dramatic confrontation I had imagined, but in a quiet surrender on a peaceful bay, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the water. As the Coast Guard secured the yacht and FBI agents boarded from one of the vessels, I sat in the borrowed speedboat, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the chase drained away, leaving nothing but the hollow reality of what had happened. My marriage was over. My trust had been shattered. My financial security had been compromised, but I had refused to be a passive victim. I had fought back. And in that knowledge, I found a small kernel of strength that I suspected would eventually grow into something more substantial. Something that would carry me forward into whatever came next. The FBI agents took Victor and Ariana into custody, directly from the yacht. I watched from the speedboat as they were handcuffed and led onto the Coast Guard vessel, their faces grim with the realization that their elaborate escape had collapsed in spectacular fashion. The leather satchel, my father's gift, was confiscated by an agent who carefully logged it as evidence. When Alejandro finally reached me, arriving on one of the police boats that had joined the operation, his expression was a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration. "That was either the bravest or the most reckless thing I've ever seen," he said, helping me from the speedboat onto the police vessel. "Probably both." I was shaking now, the aftermath of adrenaline leaving me unsteady. I couldn't let them get away with everything. An FBI agent, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, approached us. "Mrs. Delgado, I'm Special Agent Rivera. We need to take your statement, but first, are you all right? Do you need medical attention?" I shook my head. "I'm fine, just processing everything." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "It's a lot to take in. We've secured the suspects and are transporting them to the federal building downtown. We've also recovered numerous financial documents and what appears to be a significant amount of cash from their possession." "My money," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "Our savings." "Potentially, yes. We'll need to document everything and connect it to your accounts. But if we can prove those funds were directly transferred from your joint accounts, the recovery process should be relatively straightforward." Relatively straightforward. Such a clinical phrase for the mess my life had become. Agent Rivera continued. "We'll need you to come to our offices to provide a complete statement. Mr. Reyes has already shared the corporate side of this case, but we need your details on the personal accounts." I nodded mechanically. "Whatever you need." As we returned to shore, I caught a final glimpse of Victor being led toward a waiting federal vehicle, his hands cuffed behind his back. Our eyes met briefly across the distance. I expected to see anger, perhaps blame for his capture. Instead, I saw something that might have been regret, quickly masked as he was guided into the car. The parking lot had transformed into a law enforcement staging area, with multiple vehicles and officers securing the scene. The owner of the speedboat I'd borrowed was there, looking equal parts concerned and irritated as he spoke with officers. When he saw me, his expression shifted surprisingly. "You're the one who chased them down?" he asked, approaching as an officer explained who I was. I nodded, embarrassment washing over me. "I'm so sorry about taking your boat. I'll pay for any damages, any fuel." He waved away my concerns. "Boat's fine, and hell, if I'd known you were chasing down thieves who stole your life savings, I'd have handed you the keys myself." He extended his hand. "Name's Brad Thompson. You've got guts, lady." I shook his hand, oddly touched by this stranger's unexpected support. "Sarah Delgado, and thank you for understanding." The next few hours passed in a blur of statements and documentation. Alejandro stayed with me through the initial FBI interviews, providing corporate context when needed, before finally heading back to Solaris to manage the inevitable fallout there. As CEO, he had a company crisis to contain, though he promised to remain available if I needed anything. It was nearly midnight when Agent Rivera finally told me I could go home. "We have enough for now," she said, closing her notebook. "The initial charges have been filed, and both suspects will remain in custody pending trial. Based on the evidence we've recovered, it's an exceptionally strong case." "What happens now?" I asked, gathering my purse with hands that still felt disconnected from my body. For the investigation? We'll continue building the case, tracking all financial movements, interviewing witnesses. For you? She paused, her professional demeanor softening slightly. You should speak with a lawyer, both a criminal attorney to represent your interests in this case and a divorce attorney. Things will get complicated. Complicated. Another inadequate word for the dismantling of a life. I nodded, thanking her, before stepping outside into the cool night air. The federal building loomed behind me, holding my husband and the future he'd chosen instead of the one we'd planned together. I stood on the sidewalk, suddenly realizing I had no plan for getting home. My car was still at Solaris headquarters miles away. As I reached for my phone to call a rideshare, a familiar voice called my name. I turned to see Carmen hurrying toward me from a parked car across the street. "Sarah!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a fierce hug. "My God, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you all day." I melted into my sister's embrace, the events of the day finally catching up with me. "How did you find me?" I managed. "Alejandro called me," she explained, still holding me tightly. "He thought you shouldn't be alone tonight." The thoughtfulness of this gesture from a man who was essentially my husband's boss rather than my own friend broke something inside me. The composure I'd maintained through hours of questioning crumbled, and I began to sob against Carmen's shoulder. "I've got you," she murmured, guiding me toward her car. "You're coming home with me tonight." Carmen's guest room was a sanctuary of quiet after the chaos of the day. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in my hands, aware that I needed to make decisions but feeling utterly incapable of formulating a plan. My sister appeared in the doorway with a mug of tea and a determined expression. "All right," she said, sitting beside me. "It's time to strategize." I looked at her blankly. Strategize? Victor had a plan. Ariana had a plan. Now you need a plan. She took my hand firmly. "They assumed you'd crumble, that you'd be too shocked, too hurt to fight back. They underestimated you once. We're not giving anyone the chance to underestimate you again." Her confidence stirred something in me, a flicker of the same determination that had propelled me to chase Victor across the bay. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted. Carmen squeezed my hand. "You start by protecting what's left and reclaiming what was taken. First thing tomorrow, we're calling the best divorce attorney in the city. Then we're contacting your bank to secure any remaining accounts. Then we're changing the locks on your house." The practicality of these steps cut through my emotional fog. "The house," I said suddenly. "I need to check the house." "What do you mean?" "Victor's email said he left me the house, but he's been lying about everything else." "What if he took things? Important documents, family heirlooms? What if he damaged something out of spite?" Carmen nodded, understanding immediately. "We'll go first thing in the morning. Together." Sleep was impossible that night, despite my exhaustion. I lay awake in Carmen's guest room, replaying moments from my marriage, searching for signs I should have seen, warnings I should have heeded. There were so many looking back, small inconsistencies, gradual changes, subtle shifts in behavior that I had rationalized or ignored, but dwelling on hindsight wouldn't help me move forward. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, I made a decision. I wouldn't be defined by Victor's betrayal. I wouldn't spend my energy on regret or self-recrimination. Instead, I would focus entirely on rebuilding what he had tried to destroy. Carmen was already in the kitchen when I emerged, 2 legal pads on the table in front of her, making lists. She looked up as I entered, relief crossing her features at whatever she saw in my expression. "You look different," she observed. "I feel different," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "I'm done being reactive. From now on, I'm the one making the moves." Carmen smiled, sliding one of the legal pads toward me. "That's my sister. I've started a list of everything we need to address, divided by urgency." I glanced at her neat handwriting. appreciating the structured approach to the chaos. Financial concerns topped the list: securing any remaining accounts, documenting all stolen funds, contacting credit bureaus to prevent new accounts being opened in my name. Next came legal considerations: divorce proceedings, potential recovery of assets, my rights in the criminal case against Victor. "I've already called Lucia Nash," Carmen said. "She's the divorce attorney who handled my friend Sophia's case last year, the one where her ex tried to hide assets in his mother's name?" I nodded, remembering the story. Sophia's attorney had been ruthlessly effective, uncovering every attempt at financial deception. "Lucia can see you at 10, Carmen continued. "And I've scheduled an appointment with your bank at 1. I figure we can check the house between those meetings." The systematic approach felt right, each step a concrete action I could take to reclaim control of my life. I added my own items to Carmen's list, changing passwords on all accounts Victor might know, redirecting my mail, informing clients of new contact information in case Victor attempted to interfere with my business relationships. By the time we left for the divorce attorney's office, I had a comprehensive strategy taking shape. It wasn't just about the practical aspects of disentangling my life from Victor's. It was about reclaiming my narrative, refusing to be merely the victim in the story he had written. What I didn't yet realize was that this strategy would lead me to discoveries even more shocking than what I had already learned. Revelations that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the man I had married and the life we had supposedly built together. Lucia Nash's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown building with sweeping views of the city skyline. The reception area was elegant but not ostentatious, clearly designed to convey competence rather than intimidate with luxury. The message was clear: your money goes toward legal expertise, not excessive decor. Lucia herself matched her office perfectly. In her mid-50s, with steel gray hair cut in a precise bob, she radiated calm authority. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, her gaze direct and assessing. "Mrs. Delgado," she said, gesturing for Carmen and me to sit across from her desk. "I've been briefed on the basics of your situation. Extraordinary circumstances, to say the least. Please call me Sarah," I said, settling into the chair. "And yes, until 2 days ago, I thought I was in a stable, if somewhat distant, marriage. Now my husband is in federal custody for embezzlement, and I've discovered he drained our accounts before attempting to flee the country with another woman." Lucia nodded, appreciating my directness. "I've handled many high-conflict divorces involving financial misconduct, but yours has some unique elements. The federal charges complicate matters, but they may actually work in your favor for the financial recovery aspects." "How so?" Carmen asked. "The criminal investigation has already frozen assets and will be tracing all financial movements. That's work we'd normally have to do ourselves through discovery." Lucia turned to me. "Did you have a prenuptial agreement?" I shook my head. "We were young, just starting our careers. It never seemed necessary." "That works in your favor now," Lucia said. "Without a prenup, and with clear evidence of financial misconduct, we have a strong position to request not just an even split of marital assets, but potential punitive measures related to the hidden funds." The conversation continued as Lucia methodically outlined the process ahead. She explained that we would file for divorce immediately on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct, request an emergency hearing for temporary financial support, given the emptied accounts, and coordinate closely with the federal prosecutors to ensure my interests were represented in any plea deal Victor might pursue. "We need to be strategic," she emphasized. "Victor's attorneys will likely try to separate the embezzlement case from your marital assets, arguing that the stolen company funds aren't subject to division in divorce. We'll counter that the timing and pattern of transactions show a clear intent to deprive you of marital assets." I appreciated her analytical approach. It matched my own emerging mindset. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about justice and recovery. "There's one more thing you should consider," Lucia said, her expression growing more serious. With cases like this, we often discover that the financial deception goes back further than initially thought. I recommend a complete forensic accounting of your marital finances for at least the past 5 years. The implication was clear. Victor's betrayal might have deeper roots than I realized. The thought made my stomach clench, but I nodded. Whatever it takes to get the complete picture, as by. We left Lucia's office with a clear legal strategy in place. Carmen checked her watch. We have about an hour before the bank appointment. Do you want to stop by the house now? A knot formed in my throat. I hadn't been home since discovering the emptied accounts and Victor's disappearance. The thought of returning to our shared space, now contaminated by his deception, filled me with dread. But it needed to be done. Yes, I said. Let's get it over with. The drive to the craftsman home Victor and I had lovingly restored was silent, both Carmen and I lost in our thoughts. As we pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly as I'd left it 2 days ago. The garden beds I'd planted last fall blooming with spring flowers, the porch light still on from when I'd left for Carmen's in Phoenix. Nothing external signaled the seismic shifts that had occurred. My hand trembled slightly as I inserted my key into the lock. Inside, the familiar scent of home, my favorite candle, the wood polish we used on the antique furniture, the subtle hint of the rosemary plant, in the kitchen window, hit me with unexpected force. This had been my sanctuary, the place where I felt most secure. Now it felt like a stage set for a life that had been partially fictitious. Do you want me to come in with you? Carmen asked gently. I shook my head. I need to do this myself. But, stay close? She squeezed my hand. I'll be right here if you need me. Room by room, I moved through the house, cataloging what was missing, what remained. Victor had taken surprisingly little. His clothes, his personal electronics, a few books. The art we'd collected together still hung on the walls. The furniture we'd selected piece by piece remained in place. It was as if he'd excised himself from our shared space with surgical precision, leaving the external structure intact, but removing his presence within it. In our bedroom, no, my bedroom now, I opened his closet to find it mostly empty. A few old sweaters and casual clothes remained, items he clearly hadn't deemed worthy of his new life. The deliberate selection stung. He'd planned this exit carefully, choosing what deserved to accompany him to his future with Ariana. I moved to his dresser, opening drawers that contained only a few forgotten items, old t-shirts, mismatched socks, a watch I'd given him 3 Christmases ago that he'd claimed to love but apparently didn't value enough to take. Each abandoned object felt like a small rejection, a curation of what mattered and what didn't. I hadn't made the cut. The home office was where I found the first significant evidence of his preparations. The filing cabinet had been meticulously sorted through with certain folders missing, tax documents, investment records, property deeds. On his desk, a single sheet of paper remained, held down by a paperweight, a handwritten note. Sarah, by now you know I've left. I'm sorry for any pain this causes, but we both know our marriage hasn't been working for a long time. I've taken only what's mine and left you the house and its contents. This is more than fair given the circumstances. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Some endings are necessary for new beginnings. Victor, the detached formality of it, the complete absence of any acknowledgement of his theft or betrayal, ignited a fresh wave of anger. He was attempting to reframe his actions as a reasonable separation rather than the criminal abandonment it actually was. I crumpled the note and continued my search. Behind the desk, I noticed the wall safe partially concealed by a framed architectural print. A safe I knew contained important documents and valuables. Victor knew the combination, of course. With a sense of resignation, I entered the code and opened it, expecting to find it emptied. Instead, I was met with a surprising sight. Our passports, birth certificates, and marriage license remained, along with a small jewelry box containing pieces that had belonged to my grandmother. Everything with sentimental rather than monetary value had been left behind. But something else caught my eye, a folder I didn't recognize, tucked behind the other documents. I pulled it out, opening it to find a series of photographs. My breath caught as I realized what I was looking at. Victor and Ariana in various locations, a beach resort, a mountain cabin, what looked like a European city. In every image, they looked relaxed, intimate, happy. And based on the changing seasons visible in the backgrounds, these photos spanned at least 2 years. 2 years. Not the recent affair I had imagined, but a long-term parallel relationship that had coexisted with our marriage through anniversaries, holidays, family gatherings, discussions about fertility treatments, and our future. The final photo in the stack knocked the air from my lungs. Victor and Ariana standing in front of a partially constructed home on a tropical hillside, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling broadly at the camera. Written on the back in Victor's distinctive handwriting, "Our future home, Cartagena, construction begun January. January, 4 months ago." While he was telling me we needed to postpone fertility treatments due to work stress, he had been building a home with another woman. The level of duplicity was staggering. This wasn't an impulsive affair or a recent development. This was a carefully constructed double life, maintained with meticulous compartmentalization and years of sustained deception. Sank into the office chair, the folder clutched in my hands, as the full scope of Victor's betrayal finally crystallized. The man I'd married, the life we'd shared, the future we'd planned. All of it had been compromised by this parallel reality he'd been nurturing in secret, and I hadn't suspected a thing. The bank meeting proved to be another layer of Victor's deception unraveling. Mr. Hernandez, the financial advisor who had handled our accounts for years, looked visibly uncomfortable as he pulled up our records on his computer screen. "Mrs. Delgado, I need to inform you that there have been irregularities with your accounts beyond the recent withdrawals." I exchanged glances with Carmen before asking, "What kind of irregularities?" Mr. Hernandez adjusted his glasses nervously. "Over the past 18 months, there have been multiple transfers from your joint savings account to an investment account we opened for Mr. Delgado." "We don't have an investment account," I said, my stomach tightening. "At least, not one I'm aware of." "That's the irregularity," he replied carefully. "The account was opened in Mr. Delgado's name only, with documentation showing your signed consent to transfer funds from joint accounts." Carmen leaned forward. "My sister never signed any such consent." Mr. Hernandez turned his monitor toward us, showing a document with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. "This authorization was processed last year. It granted Mr. Delgado permission to move funds for family investment purposes." I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, close enough to pass a casual inspection. But certain subtle details were wrong. The way the S curved, the connecting stroke in the awe of Sarah. "That's not my signature," I said quietly. "He forged it." The forgery revelation triggered a more thorough investigation of our accounts. By the time we left the bank 2 hours later, the picture that emerged was devastating. Victor hadn't just emptied our accounts before fleeing. He had been systematically siphoning money for well over a year, moving smaller amounts to his private investment account, which had subsequently transferred funds to offshore accounts in Panama and the Cayman Islands. "We'll freeze all remaining accounts and file fraud reports immediately," Mr. Hernandez assured me. "With the criminal investigation already underway, we can expedite the process of investigating these unauthorized transfers." I nodded mechanically, still processing the extent of Victor's betrayal. The preparation, the calculation, the sustained deception required to execute this plan made my head spin. This wasn't an impulsive decision or a recent development. This was years of methodical groundwork. As we walked back to Carmen's car, my phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Delgado, this is Agent Rivera with the FBI. I wanted to update you personally. We've completed our initial examination of the documents recovered from the yacht, and there's something you should know. I braced myself. What is it? We found extensive documentation of property purchases in Colombia under the name Sunrise Investments. Multiple properties, not just one. The total investment is substantial. Well over $3 million in the past 2 years. $3 million. Far more than what Victor had taken from our personal accounts or even what he'd allegedly embezzled from Solaris. Where did that money come from? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. That's what concerns us, Agent Rivera replied. The financial trail suggests there may be additional corporate accounts involved beyond Solaris. We believe your husband may have been engaged in a much larger scheme than initially thought. The implications were staggering. Victor's crimes potentially extended beyond Solaris, beyond our marriage, a web of financial fraud that had funded his double life for years. We'd like you to come back in tomorrow if possible, Agent Rivera continued. There are some additional documents we'd like you to review, transactions that might help us understand the full scope of the situation. I'll be there, I promised, ending the call and turning to Carmen with wide eyes. What now? She asked, concern etched across her features. It's bigger than we thought. Much bigger. I relayed what Agent Rivera had told me, watching my sister's expression shift from concern to disbelief. How could he hide something that extensive? She wondered as we got into her car. By being the person I trusted most in the world, I answered softly. By knowing exactly what I paid attention to and what I didn't. Back at Carmen's house, I called Lucia to update her on the bank's findings and the FBI's new information. Her response was swift and decisive. This changes our approach, she said. With evidence of forgery and systemic financial fraud stretching back years, we can pursue a much more aggressive position in the divorce proceedings. I'll file for an emergency hearing first thing tomorrow morning. That evening, as Carmen prepared dinner, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. They're saying I stole from multiple companies. Don't believe everything you hear. You know me better than that, Victor. Somehow he had gotten access to a phone despite being in federal custody. My hands trembled as I read and reread the message. The audacity of appealing to my knowledge of his character after everything he'd done was breathtaking. Before I could decide whether to respond, another message came through. They'll try to turn you against me completely. Remember who helped you through your father's death, who supported your career changes. There are two sides to every story. The manipulation was so transparent now that I could see it clearly. The selective reminders of his support during difficult times, the implication that my perception was being manipulated rather than his actions being exposed. Classic Victor, reframing the narrative to cast himself in the most favorable light. Showed the messages to Carmen, who immediately called Lucia. Is this even legal? Him contacting her from custody? Absolutely not, Lucia replied, her voice sharp with concern. Document everything but don't respond. I'll contact the prosecutor. Immediately. This could violate the conditions of his detention. More messages arrived throughout the evening, each more desperate than the last. The FBI is exaggerating everything to build their case. You're letting them manipulate you. Ariana means nothing. She was just helping with some international investments. The photos don't tell the whole story. Think about what you're doing. 12 years together, thrown away because of a misunderstanding about finances? Each message revealed more about Victor's true character than he intended. The ease with which he dismissed Ariana, the woman he'd been building a home with, planning a future with, showed his willingness to discard people when they no longer served his purposes. The attempt to downplay emptying our accounts as a misunderstanding about finances demonstrated his pathological inability to take responsibility for his actions. The final message arrived just before midnight. If you cooperate with the prosecution, you'll regret it. I still have friends on the outside. Think carefully about your next move, Sarah. A threat. Veiled but unmistakable. The last pretense of the caring husband stripped away to reveal something much darker underneath. I forwarded it to Lucia and Agent Rivera immediately. Within 20 minutes, Agent Rivera called back. "We've identified the source of the messages," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "It appears a detention officer was allowing Mr. Delgado to use a personal phone in exchange for payment. Both are now facing additional charges. He threatened me," I said, still staring at the last message. "We're taking it very seriously," Agent Rivera assured me. "In light of this development, we'd like to arrange protection for you until we can fully assess whether there's any credible threat behind his words. The suggestion that I might need protection from my own husband, that Victor might have friends willing to do something that would make me regret cooperating, added a frightening new dimension to an already nightmarish situation." "Do you think there's a real threat?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We don't know yet," Agent Rivera replied honestly. "But given the extent of the financial crimes we're uncovering and the network of connections involved, we're not taking any chances. An officer will be stationed outside your residence beginning tonight." After ending the call, I sat in Carmen's guest room, the reality of my situation settling over me like a heavy blanket. My husband wasn't just a thief and a liar. He might be something far more dangerous. The man I had shared a bed with for 12 years, who had held me when I cried, who had discussed having children with me, was now someone I needed protection from. The painful truth was crystallizing. I had never really known Victor at all. The next morning brought a grim new reality. An unmarked police car sat outside Carmen's house, a plainclothes officer nodding respectfully when we left for my appointment at the FBI office. The implied threat in Victor's messages had transformed my divorce from a private pain into a security concern. "This is surreal," Carmen muttered as we drove downtown. "2 days ago, you were planning fertility treatments. Now you have police protection from your own husband." I stared out the window at the passing cityscape, buildings that suddenly seemed filled with strangers who might be connected to Victor's friends on the outside. "I keep thinking I'll wake up," I admitted, "that this whole thing will turn out to be some bizarre nightmare." The FBI office hummed with quiet efficiency as Agent Rivera led us to a conference room where documents were arranged in neat stacks across a large table. "These were recovered from the yacht and Mr. Delgado's company apartment," she explained. "We've organized them by type: property records, bank statements, correspondence. We'd like you to review them. Identify anything you recognize or that seems significant based on your knowledge of your husband's affairs." For the next 3 hours, I methodically worked through the evidence of Victor's double life. There were property deeds for not just the Cartagena house from the photos, but 2 additional properties, a beachfront condo in Cancun and an apartment in Panama City. All purchased within the last 2 years, all under Sunrise Investments. Most revealing were the emails between Victor and Ariana, dating back nearly 3 years. Their relationship had begun during a business trip to Bogotá, a trip I remembered, Victor extending by 2 days for site visits. The correspondence showed the gradual evolution from professional contacts to lovers to partners in both romance and crime. "The American account is secure," Victor had written in one email from last year. "No one's connecting the dots between the different corporations. We'll have the full amount transferred before anyone realizes what's happening." "The American account," I murmured, pointing this out to Agent Rivera. "What does that refer to?" She made a note. "We're still piecing together the full structure, but it appears to be one of several shell companies used to move funds between legitimate businesses and offshore accounts." As I continued reading, a disturbing pattern emerged. Victor and Ariana hadn't been working alone. References to other individuals, identified only by initials or code names, appeared throughout their communications. Phrases like, J confirms, the documentation is ready, and R will handle the regulatory side, suggested a network of accomplices. This is bigger than just Victor and Ariana, isn't it? I asked, looking up at Agent Rivera. She nodded grimly. We believe they were part of a sophisticated financial fraud network operating across multiple companies and countries. Your husband appears to have been one of the key architects, but not the only player. The revelation shifted my understanding once again. Victor's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was professional on a scale I hadn't imagined. He hadn't just stolen from me and from Solaris. He had potentially been involved in international financial crimes affecting multiple companies and individuals. As I continued through the documents, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A list of assets and liabilities in Victor's handwriting. Under liabilities, he had written, Sarah, potential claim on assets, with a note beside it. Handled. By 12/31. Today was April 3rd. Whatever handled meant, it had been scheduled for the end of the year. What do you think this means? I asked Agent Rivera, pointing to the notation. She studied it carefully. It could be interpreted various ways. Most likely, it refers to his plan to empty your accounts before leaving, eliminating your claim on those assets. But something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by her own explanation. The cold calculation of that simple notation, handled, suggested something more definitive than just taking my money. By early afternoon, I had reviewed everything the FBI had prepared. My head throbbed with the effort of processing so much. Deception. So many layers of betrayal stretching back years. You've been incredibly helpful, Agent Rivera said as she walked Carmen and me out. Your insights into these documents have provided several new leads our financial crimes team is already pursuing. What happens now? I asked, feeling oddly detached after hours of confronting evidence of my husband's crimes. For us, the investigation continues. We're working with international partners to trace all financial movements and identify other members of the network. For you? She paused, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Delgado. The protective detail will remain in place until we've fully assessed any potential threat. And please call immediately if you receive any more communications from your husband or anyone associated with him, as... We left the federal building. Carmen put her arm around my shoulders. What do you need right now? I considered the question seriously. What did I need? Security? Yes. Legal protection? Certainly. Financial stability? Eventually. But in that moment, what I needed most was something different. I need people who know the real me, I said finally. Not Victor's version of me. Not the woman who was too trusting or too blind to see what was happening. Just me. Carmen nodded, understanding immediately. Let's call the squad. By sunset, Carmen's living room had been transformed into what she jokingly called Operation Support Sarah. 4 women, my closest friends from various phases of life, gathered around the coffee table laden with takeout containers and wine bottles. The protective detail officer remained discreetly stationed outside, a surreal reminder of the circumstances that had prompted this gathering. Lucia, my college roommate and now a pediatrician, had driven 2 hours to be here. Sophia, whom I'd met in a design workshop 5 years ago, had canceled 3 client meetings. Ariana, yes, ironically the same name as the woman who had helped destroy my marriage, was my neighbor from our first apartment building, who had remained a steadfast friend through multiple moves and life changes. I still can't believe it, Sophia said, refilling my wine glass. Victor always seemed so dependable. That was his specialty, I replied, the wine softening the edge of bitterness in my voice. Seeming to be exactly what people expected him to be. Okay, Carmen announced, pulling out a whiteboard she'd brought from her home office. We're not just here for moral support. We're here to create Sarah's survival and comeback plan. I smiled weakly, touched by their determination to help. I'm not sure a whiteboard can solve international financial fraud. No, Carmen agreed. But it can organize the way forward when everything feels chaotic. She drew a line down the middle of the board. Left side is immediate needs, right side is long-term goals. Let's start filling this in. For the next hour, my friends helped me break down the overwhelming situation into manageable pieces. Immediate needs included securing temporary financial support. Lucia offered her guest house rent-free, updating client contracts with new contact information. Sophia, who worked in the same industry, volunteered to help with wording, and establishing a routine for my mental health. Ariana, who had survived her own traumatic divorce years earlier, shared her coping strategies. The process was therapeutic, transforming the nebulous crisis into concrete tasks with solutions. But as we moved to long-term planning, reality intruded with a phone call from Agent Rivera. "Mrs. Delgado," she began, her tone instantly alerting me that something had changed. "I'm calling to inform you that we've received credible information about potential interference with your financial accounts and professional relationships." My stomach dropped. What kind of interference? "It appears that before his arrest, your husband set several plans in motion. We've intercepted communications suggesting he arranged for someone to contact your clients with damaging claims about your professional conduct." I closed my eyes, the room suddenly spinning slightly. What claims? Allegations of ethical violations in your architectural consulting work, specifically, accepting kickbacks from contractors for project referrals. The accusation was not just false, but calculated to strike at the heart of my professional reputation. Architecture and design consulting operated largely on trust and referrals. Even unfounded ethics allegations could destroy a career overnight. "That's absurd," I said, my voice tight. We know," Agent Rivera interrupted gently. "We found no evidence to support these claims. But we wanted to warn you because it appears these allegations may begin circulating as early as tomorrow through anonymous emails to your client list." The methodical cruelty of it took my breath away. Even from federal custody, Victor was finding ways to destroy what remained of my life. "Is there anything I can do to stop it?" I asked. "We're working with the prosecutor to expand the charges against your husband to include witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. But practically speaking, the most effective approach would be for you to proactively contact your most important clients before they receive these communications." After ending the call, I turned to face my friends, their expressions a mixture of shock and outrage as I relayed what Agent Rivera had told me. "He's trying to destroy your livelihood now?" Sophia exclaimed. "This is beyond divorce spite. This is sociopathic." Carmen added a new section to the whiteboard. "Emergency client communications." "We need to draft a message tonight," she said, switching into crisis management mode. "Something that acknowledges the situation without creating panic. Professional, direct, just enough detail to inoculate against whatever Victor sends." Sophia nodded, already pulling out her laptop. "I've handled reputation management for design firms. Let me help draft this." As my friends mobilized around this new threat, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was Victor's true face, the vindictive, calculating man behind the dependable husband mask. The man who, even facing federal charges, would use his remaining resources to ensure I didn't survive his downfall intact. But he had miscalculated again. He had assumed I would face this alone, without support or resources to counter his attacks. Looking around at the determined women filling Carmen's living room with action plans and solution strategies, I realized Victor had never truly understood a fundamental truth about me. While he had built his life on deception and isolation, I had built mine on authentic connections. By midnight, we had drafted and sent a carefully worded email to all my clients explaining that my husband was under federal investigation for financial crimes and that, unfortunately, some false allegations about my professional conduct might circulate as a result. I assured them that any such claims were completely unfounded, invited them to contact me directly with concerns, and attached a statement from Lucia Nash, now officially my divorce attorney, confirming the legal situation. It was a preemptive move against Victor's attack, but we all knew it might not be enough. Some clients would inevitably be spooked by any hint of controversy. Projects might be delayed or canceled. Referrals would likely dry up temporarily. As my friends finally departed around 1 a.m., Carmen hanging back to squeeze my shoulder reassuringly, I faced the stark reality that Victor's campaign against me was just beginning. The financial assets he'd stolen were only the first salvo. Now he was targeting something even more valuable: my professional reputation and future earning capacity. I lay awake in Carmen's guest room, staring at the ceiling, mentally cataloging everything Victor still had the power to damage in my life: my reputation, my client relationships, my credit score if he defaulted on any joint obligations I wasn't yet aware of, possibly even my physical safety if his veiled threats materialized. The path forward would not be as straightforward as filling out a whiteboard with action items. It would be a constant battle against whatever destructive plans Victor had set in motion before his arrest, and whatever new attacks he could orchestrate from behind bars. The next morning brought the expected storm. 3 clients called before 9 a.m., each having received anonymous emails with detailed, though fabricated, allegations about improper billing practices and contractor kickbacks. Despite my preemptive message, I could hear the hesitation in their voices, the seed of doubt Victor had successfully planted. "I understand your concerns completely," I told each of them, maintaining a calm I didn't feel. "I welcome any review of my billing and contractor selection processes. In fact, I'd be happy to provide full documentation for every project decision, if that would help reassure you." 2 seemed mollified. The third, a major commercial client whose project represented nearly a quarter of my anticipated annual income, decided to pause our engagement pending resolution of these concerns. Sat at Carmen's kitchen island, staring at my phone after that particularly difficult call, fighting back tears of frustration. "He's winning," I said when Carmen joined me, pushing a cup of coffee across the counter. "1 email, and I've already lost my biggest client." "This isn't winning or losing," Carmen replied firmly. "This is you weathering the worst storm while he sits in a federal detention center facing decades in prison." Before I could respond, my phone rang again. I braced myself for another client cancellation, but the caller ID showed Alejandro Reyes from Solaris International. "Sarah," he began without preamble, "I assume you've heard about the allegations being circulated about your professional conduct?" "Unfortunately, yes. Victor seems determined to burn my life to the ground even from custody." "I thought as much," Alejandro said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm calling because similar allegations are being directed at several Solaris executives who had close working relationships with Victor. It appears to be a coordinated attempt to discredit potential witnesses against him." This was larger than just an attack on me. Victor was systematically targeting anyone who could testify against him, using preemptively planted allegations to undermine credibility. "What are you doing about it?" I asked, fighting back publicly. "I've called an emergency press conference for noon today. Solaris is officially denouncing these allegations as retaliatory actions by a former executive facing serious criminal charges." He paused. "I'd like you to join me at this press conference." The request caught me completely off guard. "Me? Why?" "Because independently responding to whisper campaigns rarely works. A unified front from multiple targets of these allegations sends a much stronger message." His tone softened slightly. "And frankly, Sarah, you have an extremely compelling story to tell. The wife who discovered her husband's crimes, helped capture him, and is now being victimized again through these false allegations." The strategic part of my brain, the part that had been gradually awakening since discovering the emptied accounts, recognized the logic in Alejandro's suggestion. Individual denials could be dismissed. A coordinated response from multiple targets created a narrative of orchestrated retaliation by Victor. "I've never done anything like a press conference," I said hesitantly. "You chased your husband across a marina in a stolen speedboat," Alejandro reminded me, a hint of wry amusement in his voice. "I think you can handle a few reporters." The memory of that moment, the determination that had propelled me to take action rather than collapse in despair, stirred something in me. Victor expected me to hide, to defend myself in private while my reputation unraveled. He wouldn't expect me to step into the spotlight and fight back publicly. "What time should I be there?" I asked. 3 hours later, I stood beside Alejandro and 2 other Solaris executives on the steps of the company headquarters, as cameras flashed and reporters called questions. Dressed in a tailored navy suit borrowed from Carmen, my own clothes still at the house I wasn't ready to return to, I projected a confidence I didn't entirely feel. Alejandro spoke first, his statement crisp and authoritative. "Solaris International has uncovered evidence that the recent allegations against company executives and associates are part of a coordinated attempt to intimidate and discredit potential witnesses in the ongoing federal investigation of Victor E. Delgado. We are providing this evidence to federal prosecutors and expect additional charges of witness tampering to be filed imminently." When my turn came, I stepped forward, acutely aware of the cameras trained on my face. The speech Sophia and I had crafted that morning was memorized, but as I looked at the assembled reporters, I set it aside. Instead, I spoke directly from my heart. "My name is Sarah Delgado. 3 days ago, I discovered that my husband of 12 years had emptied our bank accounts and was attempting to flee the country with another woman. Since then, I've learned that he had been living a double life for years, embezzling from his company, building properties overseas, and systematically transferring our savings to accounts I had no knowledge of." I paused, making brief eye contact with different reporters to ensure they captured the sincerity in my eyes. "Now, from federal custody, my husband is attempting to destroy what he couldn't steal: my professional reputation and livelihood. These allegations about my business practices are completely false, designed specifically to punish me for cooperating with authorities and to undermine my testimony in the coming legal proceedings." My voice grew stronger as I continued. "I want to speak directly to anyone else who might be experiencing what I'm going through, whether in a personal relationship or a professional context where trust has been violated. Don't be silenced by shame or fear. Don't let the person who betrayed you control the narrative. The truth is more powerful than any fabricated allegation, but only if we have the courage to speak it publicly." As the press conference concluded, reporters called follow-up questions, many directed specifically to me. With Alejandro's guidance, I answered selectively, providing enough personal detail to humanize the story without venturing into areas that might compromise the ongoing investigation. By the time we returned inside the building, video clips were already circulating on news sites and social media. The narrative was shifting from isolated allegations of professional misconduct to a coordinated campaign of witness intimidation by a desperate financial criminal. "You were remarkable out there," Alejandro said, as we watched the coverage on a monitor in the Solaris conference room. "Genuine, dignified, compelling." What neither of us could have anticipated was how quickly the story would spread, or how deeply it would resonate. By evening, my inbox was filling with messages, not just from clients reassuring me of their continued confidence, but from strangers sharing their own stories of betrayal and financial abuse in relationships. Victor Delgado victims became a trending hashtag as more individuals connected to Solaris or Victor's other business dealings came forward with similar experiences of being targeted after questioning financial irregularities. The press conference hadn't just defended my reputation, it had transformed the isolated attacks against me into a pattern of behavior that reinforced the case against Victor. What he had intended as a destructive blow had instead become a turning point in reclaiming my narrative and potentially strengthening the prosecution's case against him. The weeks following the press conference passed in a blur of legal meetings, FBI interviews, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding my life piece by piece. The protective detail remained in place, though Agent Rivera had assured me there was no evidence Victor's vague threats had manifested into actual danger. Through Lucia Nash's aggressive legal strategy, the court had frozen all known assets connected to Victor, including the properties in Colombia and Panama. An emergency spousal support order had been granted, providing me with temporary financial relief from accounts that had been seized as evidence but were clearly marital property. Most surprisingly, my professional life had not only survived Victor's attacks, but seemed to be flourishing in an unexpected way. The publicity from the press conference had led to inquiries from potential clients who admired my public stance. 2 design magazines had requested interviews about resilience in professional crises. While I was careful not to exploit the situation for publicity, these opportunities provided a path toward rebuilding my career on new foundations. 6 weeks after discovering the emptied accounts, I received a call from Agent Rivera requesting an urgent meeting at the federal building. Carmen insisted on accompanying me, both for moral support and because she had grown increasingly protective since the threats. Agent Rivera met us in the now familiar conference room, but this time she wasn't alone. A distinguished man in his 60s sat beside her, his silver hair and tailored suit suggesting someone of significant authority. "Mrs. Delgado, this is U.S. Attorney Lawrence Bennett," Agent Rivera introduced us. "He's overseeing the prosecution of your husband's case." Bennett extended his handshake firm and direct. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Delgado. We have some significant developments to discuss." I took a seat, bracing myself for whatever new revelation or complication had emerged. "Good news or bad news?" "Both, in a manner of speaking," Bennett replied, opening a leather portfolio. "First, we've completed a comprehensive forensic analysis of all financial transactions connected to your husband and his co-conspirators. The scope is, well, frankly, larger than we initially believed." He pushed a document across the table with figures that made my eyes widen. The embezzlement scheme hadn't just involved Solaris International. It had extended to 3 other companies where Victor had consulting relationships or business connections. The total amount misappropriated approached $7 million over a 4-year period. $7 million, I repeated, the number almost incomprehensible. "And no one noticed?" "The scheme was sophisticated," Agent Rivera explained. "Small percentages skimmed from large international transfers, disguised as currency conversion fees or regulatory costs. The amounts from any single transaction were designed to fall below typical audit thresholds." Bennett continued. "This expanded scope has strengthened our case considerably. However, that brings me to the reason for this meeting. Mr. Delgado's attorneys have approached us about a potential plea agreement." My pulse quickened. "What kind of agreement?" "He's offering to provide detailed information about the entire network of participants in the scheme, including several individuals we haven't yet identified, in exchange for consideration during sentencing." I understood the implication immediately. Victor was willing to turn on his accomplices to save himself from the maximum penalties. "What does this mean for recovery of the stolen funds?" I asked, thinking practically about my financial future. "That's actually the more positive development," Bennett said, his expression softening slightly. "As part of the proposed agreement, Mr. Delgado would provide full disclosure of all financial accounts and cooperate in the repatriation of funds still under his control." Agent Rivera added, "Our financial crimes team has already located approximately $3.2 million in various offshore accounts. With Mr. Delgado's cooperation, we believe we can recover as much as $5 million of the total amount." The potential recovery of such a substantial portion of the stolen funds was unexpected good news, but something still bothered me. What about Ariana Vega? Is she also seeking a plea deal? Bennett and Agent Rivera exchanged glances. Ms. Vega has been less cooperative, Bennett said carefully. She maintains that she was manipulated by your husband and had limited knowledge of the full scope of the scheme. That's not true, I said firmly, remembering the emails I'd reviewed. She was an active participant. The correspondence between them makes that clear. We agree, Agent Rivera assured me. The evidence against her is substantial. However, without her cooperation, recovering funds she may control becomes more challenging. Bennett leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Delgado, while you have no formal role in approving or rejecting the proposed plea agreement, the prosecution values your perspective. You've been both a victim of these crimes and a key witness in building our case. I appreciated the respect this showed for my position, even though legally I had no authority over the prosecution's decisions. What are the terms of the proposed sentencing reduction? Instead of the potential maximum of 30 years, we would recommend a sentence of 12 to 15 years, with the possibility of parole after serving 85% of the term. Bennett watched my reaction carefully. It's still a significant sentence for white-collar crime. I considered this information, trying to separate my personal feelings about Victor's betrayal from the practical aspects of the case. A cooperative. Victor meant better chances of financial recovery, additional prosecutions of other participants in the scheme, and a guaranteed substantial prison sentence without the risks of a trial. I support whatever approach recovers the most money for all victims and ensures Victor and his accomplices face appropriate consequences, I said finally. If his cooperation helps achieve that, then I won't object to the proposed terms. Bennett nodded, respect evident in his expression. Thank you for your perspective. We'll proceed with the negotiation process. He gathered his papers, standing to signal the meeting's conclusion. One more thing, Mrs. Delgado. Regardless of the plea agreement, the prosecution will advocate for maximum restitution to you personally as the primary individual victim in this case. As Carmen and I left the federal building, a strange sense of closure began to settle over me. Victor would spend at least a decade in prison. Substantial funds would likely be recovered. The legal system was working as it should. How do you feel? Carmen asked as we walked to her car. I considered the question carefully. Like this chapter is ending, even if the story isn't over yet. Like I can finally start thinking about a future that isn't defined by what Victor did. 3 days later, the news became official. Victor had accepted the plea agreement, providing detailed statements about the entire financial scheme and surrendering all claims to the recovered assets. His formal sentencing would occur in 6 weeks, but the terms were essentially set. 14 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole until at least 12 years had been served. What surprised me most was my own reaction to the news. Not satisfaction or vindication, but simply relief. The constant anxiety of fighting Victor's machinations was lifting. The immediate battle was won. Now I could focus on rebuilding rather than just surviving. 1 year after discovering Victor's betrayal, I stood in the entryway of my new home, a modern loft overlooking the river, purchased with my portion of the recovered funds. The space looked nothing like the craftsman house I'd shared with Victor. That had been intentional. I'd sold our old home 6 months earlier, unable to feel comfortable in rooms that held too many memories of a life built on deception. This loft, with its clean lines and open floor plan, represented my new beginning. I'd designed the interior myself, my first major personal project since the crisis. Every element reflected choices made solely for my own happiness, not compromises with a partner who had never truly shared my vision. My design business had not only recovered but evolved. After the media attention from the case subsided, I'd made a deliberate decision to specialize in helping people reclaim and reimagine spaces after major life transitions, divorces, career changes, empty nests. The work was deeply fulfilling, combining my design skills with the emotional intelligence I'd developed through my own transformation. The federal case against Victor and his co-conspirators had concluded with a series of convictions. Victor was serving his 14-year sentence at a medium security facility across the state. Ariana had eventually accepted a plea deal of her own, receiving 8 years. The network of accomplices had largely been dismantled, with restitution ordered to all corporate and individual victims. Financial recovery had been substantial, but not complete. Of the $7 million stolen, authorities had managed to recover just over $4 million. My personal accounts had been restored to approximately 80% of what Victor had taken, enough for security, but not without lasting impact. The fertility treatments we'd been saving for remained financially out of reach for now, though I hadn't abandoned that dream entirely. Carmen entered from the kitchen, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "Happy 1-year anniversary of taking your life back," she said, handing me a glass. I smiled, accepting the toast. "Strange thing to celebrate." "Not strange at all," Carmen countered. "You survived something designed to destroy you. That deserves acknowledgement." We moved to the balcony, looking out over the city lights reflecting on the river below. The evening was mild, the spring air carrying the scent of new beginnings. "Do you ever wonder about him?" Carmen asked carefully. "About how he's doing in there?" I considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. Not because I miss him, but because I still struggle to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the person he actually was." I took a sip of champagne. I stopped sending the divorce papers after the 3rd time he refused to sign them. Eventually, the court granted it by default. "He still can't admit it's over," Carmen observed. Control was always everything to Victor. Signing those papers would mean acknowledging he'd lost the last bit of connection to me. I shrugged. "But his signature doesn't matter. I'm free either way." We stood in comfortable silence, watching boats move along the river, their lights creating temporary pathways on the dark water. "What's the most important thing you've learned?" Carmen asked eventually. "From all of this?" I didn't need to think long about my answer. The lessons of the past year had been hard-won but crystalline in their clarity. That betrayal doesn't define you. Your response to it does. That starting over isn't failure, but courage. And that sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most authentic beginnings. Standing in my kitchen 3 years after that life-changing April morning, I look at the woman reflected in the window glass and barely recognize the person I was before. Not because I've changed completely, the core of who I am remains intact, but because I've discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. Let me speak directly to you now. Yes, you, who might be facing your own betrayal or challenge. When Victor emptied our accounts and attempted to flee with another woman, taking not just our savings but the future we'd planned together, I could have been destroyed. Many expected me to be. Perhaps even I expected it of myself. Instead, I discovered something powerful. Betrayal reveals not just the character of the person who betrays you, but your own capacity for resilience. The very moment designed to break you can become the foundation on which you build an authentic life, one that truly belongs to you, not the version someone else scripted for you to play. You may feel alone right now. You may feel that the ground beneath you has disappeared entirely. You may wonder if you'll ever trust again, if you'll ever stop feeling the sharp edges of this pain that follows you everywhere. I want you to know that this moment does not define your entire story. What defines you is what you choose to do next. You have more strength within you than you realize. I discovered mine when I had no other choice. You will find yours too. Remember that no one, absolutely no one, has the right to determine your worth or to write the ending of your story. That power remains solely in your hands. The path forward won't be easy. There will be days when fighting seems harder than surrendering, when the weight of what you've lost overwhelms the possibility of what you might build. On those days, be gentle with yourself, but don't stop moving forward. Find your allies, the people who see your truth and stand beside you when you can't stand alone. Document your evidence, protect what matters, trust your instincts, and know that your voice deserves to be heard. The person who betrayed you was counting on your silence, your shame, your surrender. Don't give them that satisfaction. Instead, rise. Rise with dignity. Rise with determination. Rise with the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are worth fighting for. Your story isn't over. In fact, the most authentic chapter might be the one you're about to write. The one where you reclaim not just what was taken, but discover parts of yourself you never knew existed. I believe in you. Now it's time for you to believe in yourself. This isn't just about survival. This is about transformation, and you are more than capable of both. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.